Hello, good evening and welcome. This is BizFirst Review 360, your weekly roundup of the top business news and developments impacting the economy. I'm Nadim Majid. The no-confidence motion against Prime Minister Ranil Wickremesinghe was comprehensively defeated in Parliament this week. We also saw the central bank signalling an end to the tightening of monetary policy. Meanwhile, a delegation of members of the European Parliament is in the country to review GSP+. Let's take a look at this week's top stories.
A visiting delegation of the European Parliament Committee on International Trade welcomed progress on legislative and policy reforms required to retain the GSP Plus trade concessions, but insisted that compliance was not demands imposed on Sri Lanka.
There has been much delivery already by Sri Lanka on so many of the different issues that we wanted to see these tracts put in place on. But there is further work to do. There is an opportunity to do that now, and I hope that Sri Lanka will seize this immediate opportunity that's available. It's important that we need to dispel the myth of external demands. There is quite clearly certain sections of political discourse in Sri Lanka that likes to push this message to the Sri Lankan people that there are demands that are being made from Europe and possibly elsewhere as well. That is simply not the case. The point is that actually Sri Lanka has to want to lift its standards for itself. And we believe that the people of Sri Lanka genuinely are committed to wanting to raise their own standards, the country's standards, and thereby their own living standards as well. I have heard use of the phrase in parliamentary debates here in Sri Lanka before that the European Union demands X or the European Union demands Y. We demand nothing. This is a journey we are undertaking as partners, as equal partners with Sri Lanka, in order ultimately to arrive at a place where we have a strong Sri Lanka, an open Sri Lanka, a vibrant Sri Lanka, a tolerant Sri Lanka, a Sri Lanka that is providing opportunity for its citizens and is raising their living standards.
The delegation was pleased to note that trade between EU and Sri Lanka is on an upward trajectory following the restoration of the GSP Plus facility. With the entry of the GSP Plus concessions for Sri Lanka exports, EU has become the Sri Lanka's largest trading partner. The delegation said Sri Lanka should continue with reforms and addressing the remaining issues to make further progress in implementing international human rights conventions relevant to GSP Plus and improve labour conditions. The EU delegation said it's committed to maintain the GSP Plus facility alive and ensure Sri Lanka is a stable country for investment.
We are interested in security issues, judiciary matters, because it's very important for overseas investors and European investors as well to be certain that Sri Lanka is a stable and predictable country.
Reuters, citing dealers, said the rupee ended strong on Thursday on exporter dollar conversions and inward remittances, as Prime Minister Ranil Wickremesinghe surviving a no-confidence motion boosted sentiment. The rupee, which traded at 155.30 per dollar earlier in the session, closed 0.3% firmer at 155.50 or 60 per dollar, compared with Wednesday's close of 155.80 or 95. The rupee gained 0.4% last week. The report said the win eased concerns over the political uncertainty of a possible government change, and investors bought longer tenure bonds on Thursday. Reuters, quoting a currency dealer, said exporter dollar conversions to pay salaries ahead of festival and inward remittances helped the rupee gain. The importer dollar demand has eased. There were demand for longer tenure bonds like 10-year T-bonds after the no-confidence vote ended yesterday. The currency has recovered and risen 0.6% since it hit a record low of 156.20 per dollar on March 16. The rupee has weakened 1.3% so far this year, after declining 2.5% last year and 3.9% in 2016. A gradual depreciation in the rupee and higher volatility are expected this year on account of debt repayments by the government, according to Reuters, citing dealers. Amid rising political uncertainty following the no-confidence motion, Central Bank Governor Dr. Indrajit Kumaraswamy called for a working framework to ensure delivery of government services and the continuity of policy and economic development. Kumaraswamy warned that political instability could take a toll on the island's growth trajectory.
We've essentially had a few weeks really of uncertainty. The important thing now is to have some kind of stable outcome whereby government can work effectively. That is the most important thing. Politics can go on, but the government must function effectively, and the framework must exist for the government to deliver its basic services, to formulate policy, to deliver its development programs effectively. That's what's most important. Clearly a coalition government, there will be different views. But what has been encouraging is that so far, whether it was on VAT, whether it was on the Inland Revenue Act, whether it was on the Hambantota Port deal, there were clearly strong opposition. People went to court, people demonstrated on the streets, there were disagreements within the government, but somehow the government was able to deliver, in the sense that very tough reforms were made to the VAT. The Inland Revenue Act was passed, which is significant achievement in my view. And the Hambantota deal, which I think was very important, both in terms of raising money for us to manage our debt, as well as for development of one of the lagging regions in the country, in that part of Sri Lanka. So, the government has shown that it can take tough decisions, but it's not necessarily going to be a very tidy, linear process within a coalition government.
He made these remarks at a media briefing held to announce a cut in the standing lending facility rate, which is the upper bound of the policy interest corridor of the central bank, by 25 basis points. The central bank cited favourable inflation and subdued growth as a rationale to cut the standing lending facility rate by 25 basis points to 8.50%, a first in 3 years, and maintain the standing deposit facility rate at 7.25%. The move signals an end to the bank's monetary policy tightening bias and is expected to stabilise interest rates in the short term ahead of the Aurudu festival season.
The Monetary Board felt it would be timely at this juncture to give a signal that the tightening phase of monetary policy should come to an end at this point, and that is a signal that it was keen to deliver.
We are relaxing the tightening bias we have been maintaining over more than 2 years in the past on the basis of the forward-looking indicators and the outlook in growth and inflation. In addition to that, what you have seen some recent volatility in short-term interest rates, especially in the call rates from 29th of March, mainly partly due to withdrawal of currency, and that has created some shortfall liquidity tightening in the market due to festival demand for currency. That's one reason. And other one was due to some uncertainty in the tax treatment on short-term interest rates, especially the call rates and the repo rates. So because of that, we had seen some undue increase in short-term rates. We expect this distortion or undue volatility will dissipate within a couple of days, and it's already started to adjust. And with that, we should be able to maintain the short-term rates in the middle of the policy rate corridor, which is now a narrower range. That also would help us to maintain much more focused short-term interest rates and for us to maintain stable stable short-term rates in line with the overall monetary policy stance.
The central bank said the economy is expected to grow by an estimated 5% in 2018 from the shock 3.1% recorded in 2017.
Stay tuned to Biz First Review 360. On the other side, the future of Sri Lankan Airlines. Welcome back to the program. The new board of directors of Sri Lankan Airlines has expressed confidence that they can turn around the airline within the next 3 years and reach a break-even point. The 4-member board of directors convened a press briefing in Colombo this week.
The board is not going to get involved with the day-to-day operations of the airline. That is left to management. We, of course, will have a supervisory role, an overseeing role over management. And we are going to demand, we are going to set down clear objectives to be achieved by management, and we will demand performance according to those objectives. Today the airline is incurring losses, huge losses. The last year's losses, the year that we finished, is roughly around $100 million. So, and we have huge debts totaling to about $750 million. And we have also aircrafts which the consultants have pointed out are not suited for the routes, some of the routes that we are really flying. So a lot of changes have to be made. And we are keen to make those changes. We will go about these changes. There is also an overstaffing issue which we need to tackle. And we will, each one of us will get into those issues, areas carefully with the advice of competent airline consultants whom we have already hired.
The period of basically dole-outs and handouts are over, but the Treasury will back the Sri Lankan Airlines, will continue to give its fullest support, but it will be on the basis that we will see a long-term return. We are not expecting a short-term return in 6 months, 1 year. That is actually not practical. But we would be with the airline and we would support it in the long term. But it will have to be on the basis that the money that the Treasury is committing will have to have reasonable returns, because ultimately this is public money.
In fulfilling the gap in capital that we need, because already we are having a negative equity of about $500 million. About $300-400 million, and we are making a loss today. So we can't continue to recapitalize. We can't expect the government to put in large amounts of capital into the airline to really restructure the airline. We have to also see other possibilities of getting other investors to come. And a strategic alliance will also help us in the operational areas. So we haven't come to that stage yet of talking to other people. But very soon we will consider that option also. According to consultants also, if we can get the thing moving and do the restructuring that is necessary, they are hard decisions. So it's very difficult to put a timeline, but we hope within 2 to 3 years we will turn it around. Today it is making huge losses and we are operationally unviable. So to turn it around, we need the cooperation of so many people, we need basic decisions. And we are really at that stage of trying to grapple with those issues, and we hope we can turn it around in 2 to 3 years. No one today will come into the airline making losses. Why should they come really? 100 million losses, I mean, why should they put in money? Unless we see a plan, unless we go to them with a credible plan, we won't be able to get an attractive offer for it. Interest payments that have to be made on the borrowings that are made. Then we are also using unsuitable aircrafts, wide-bodied aircrafts, where those aircrafts need to be really replaced by narrow-bodied aircrafts, because resulting in a loss in some of those routes, because we are using inappropriate we have bought those, and we have huge commitments on lease payments, other borrowings that have been made. We have overpaid on many of the airlines that we have bought. Even the lease payments are far above market price. I mean, those will come out as we go on. As you know, there is a presidential commission also appointed to look at the running of the airline during the past period. It is not our task to really try and look at those, and we are not looking at the past. That is a matter for the Presidential Commission. And the forecast, budget forecast is 130 million loss next year, next March, which that will be reviewed, which we can't afford to. We can't afford to. How is the government going to do that? Because they'll have to take money from the people and then provide the airline. Why should we run an airline like that? People will question. We have brought in consultants, and also we may take decisions to change management if it is necessary, because that is part of the responsibility of a board. The most important decision that a board makes is to appoint management. That is what the shareholders have given to the board, and say you run and appoint people who can competently run the thing. So we feel that there are changes necessary. I mean, that is a very preliminary view that we take, and those changes will be made. Without that, the board can't run the airline.
What is the future of business opportunities between Sri Lanka and New Zealand? We hear from the New Zealand Commissioner for Trade to Sri Lanka.
Thank you, Ralph. Thank you for joining Biz First Review 360. I understand that this is the 4th visit of a New Zealand trade delegation to Sri Lanka in recent times. What makes Sri Lanka attractive right now?
For our smaller companies, I think it's a market that's a little bit more accessible. The communication lines are smaller, and the companies can come here and tap into that global supply chain. You've now signed an FTA with Singapore. I'm getting a lot of interest from companies in that place, and I think there's the similarities around New Zealand and Sri Lanka as island nations. Tourism plays a big part as well, and that's our #1 export earner for New Zealand. We can see along the Gore Road here on the waterfront, you can see all of this infrastructure, all of that activity coming. So we've got a diverse portfolio of companies here looking to tap into this growth and development that we're seeing in Singapore.
There are over 10 companies participating.
13 companies.
Yeah. Can you tell me a little bit about the composition?
3 or 4 companies in the infrastructure space. We've got 3 or 4 companies, Fisher & Paykel Healthcare, MedTech, 80 Instruments that are into the health sector. So we've got some meetings lined up for them over the next couple of days. We've got a pilot training company here. So education, I think, is an important part of the mix. We've got some ICT companies, and we've got some aviation companies and some software and ICT companies and consulting companies around design and architecture.
Right now, the island is going through a rough patch because of the uncertainty in the political environment. Has that concerned you?
No, that's. I think my experience, having worked in other difficult countries in the past, is that business goes on despite the government. So we're moving on. People will still need to eat. Healthcare will still need to be delivered. People will still need to travel, do business. So for us, that's not too much of a concern for us. It would only be a concern for those companies that maybe they have a connection through government, or they're selling into where the government plays a part, so maybe health sector. But the majority of our companies are private sector, working through commercial channels, so they're not as affected by the political instability. So again, that's not a big concern. We've got a good delegation here, the 4th time we're coming. We said Sri Lanka, and we got a good uptake, and 22 delegates, 13 companies is a good number. And it's the similar number we had last year and the year before, so it hasn't really featured as part of their concern.
We haven't achieved much in terms of ease of doing business as well. There's a lot more work Sri Lanka needs to do. How are investors looking at Sri Lanka with that background?
My team's objective here is really looking to diversify and partner with Sri Lankan partners. Less of the put something in a container and export it to Sri Lanka. I think we're looking, on this mission, almost all of the delegation are looking to partner, a JV, establish an entity. We've got some commercial workshops on that tomorrow, and tap into the resource that Sri Lanka has, and look at Sri Lanka as it's strategically well placed for us to use as a channel into the wider markets. Can we use it as a channel to India? Can we use it as a channel to the Middle East? I know you've got major shipping lanes are only 5 kilometres off the coast, so we're looking at that. And as the Minister said, you know, can Sri Lanka be the sort of Hong Kong for China in that sort of scenario? So we're looking really more to invest than just put things in a container and ship it overseas.
Sri Lanka is also to play a major role in China's One Belt One Road initiative, the Maritime Silk Road. Do you see the potential for Sri Lanka to be a gateway once things come online to bigger markets?
Absolutely, yeah. So we're seeing, you can see that with your FTA with Singapore. So I'm getting a lot of interest from those companies in that part of the world to use this as a gateway. I understand the port city, this activity over here. Interesting thing about that, and someone was saying that this is going to be the connection between the Singapore and Dubai, and this port city is part of that. I've seen some of the plans, really dynamic and interesting. And so as I said earlier, we see Sri Lanka as a gateway to the region. You're an island nation like us. We've been traders for a long time. So we're keen to tap into your strategic location and your ability as a trading nation to, again, put our resources together for the better of both sides to manage. We're very optimistic of the future. High Commission opening. Now I'm under pressure to get the All Blacks here next year for that, which I think, I've been out to the Ceylon Rugby Club, been feted like given lots of great hospitality, so I'm under pressure now to bring that.
So we'll be anticipating All Blacks in Sri Lanka very soon. Thank you very much, Raf. Thank you for joining us.
We'll be right back after this short commercial break. On the other side, we chat to governance activist Mr. Chandra Jayaratne. Welcome back to the program. What is the future of governance reforms as far as Sri Lanka is concerned, and the commitments that were envisioned by the January 2015 mandate? I sat down for a chat with the noted governance activist and former chairman of the Ceylon Chamber of Commerce, Mr. Chandra Jayaratne. Mr. Jayaratne, as always, it's a pleasure to have you on the show.
Thank you.
Let me start by asking you, 3 years on, now we've just seen the defeat of the no confidence motion in the Prime Minister. Comprehensive defeat, 120 votes to 76. There's a lot of political horse trading and deal making that has gone on, is what the experts are and the political pundits are opining. Where is the country now in terms of getting our governance on track, in improving our structures, strengthening our democratic institutions? Where are we now, 3 years down the line? What has happened?
I think I will leave the where are we now and how did we get here to the analysts you talked about, your station and others. But I will look at the future, and let's start with what can happen from where we are today. If we look ahead, all I can see ahead, reading from the current external environment, is more instability, economic governance, social upliftment, and delivery of the promises in a way that will positively impact on the future generations of this country. I think today is at the lowest level of hope in any one of those 3 areas. Because if you look ahead, I mean, the governor of the central bank takes a very positive step. Yes, macro numbers are looking good, or not as bad as it can be. So he eases one side of the equation and reduces to activate more. But he goes on the premise that there will be political stability. Now, I doubt there being political stability in the next 12 months to 18 months, definitely not. If political stability is not there, I can't see economic governance, social upliftment, and the nation's future being fashioned, framed, massaged, and taken forward with commitment to the future generations.
I'd like to draw your attention to something that the Chief Opposition Whip and JVP leader, Mr. Anukumara Dissanayake, said in Parliament. He said, if you had concentrated on the January 8, 2015 mandate and implementing that mandate instead of the deal making, you may have had a much longer political journey or much more stability. Do you think that that's what has happened, that the failure to deliver on the mandate is why we are looking at a situation where we're not going to have political stability over the next 18 months?
Certainly, yes. If that had been implemented today, we would have and could have been on the way towards the recovery, and this one time it not being a missed opportunity. But up to now it's a missed opportunity and looks more like a missed opportunity into the future.
At the same time, though, to be fair by the government, we have seen some positive developments. Of course, there is a culture of free expression where you're free to criticize. There is the Right to Information Act, very crucial legislation that was passed last year. Then we have, or that came into force last year. And then we have just this week, just ahead of the no confidence motion, the National Audit Bill was tabled in Parliament. When you look at those positives, is it still dissatisfactory?
Since the word, all the points you mentioned probably were short-term goals with short-term good positive results. But the very nature of the change was to make a change for good, which should make a transformation of our society. A society in which equity, peace, treating one another as Sri Lankans, all getting together, developing oneness and committed towards one single goal for the betterment of future generations. The long-term stability, the long-term growth, long-term prosperity was the foundation to be built on the small and the small steps. It looks as if we have got some incremental changes which are positive, but they have to be built upon. 3 years is a time in which the foundation should have reached a stage of being built into the building structure outside, and what was needed is only the roof and the outer cladding or whatever.
And that's a wrap of our program for tonight. You can look us up on Facebook. You'll find us at BizFirst Review 360. I'll see you again, same time, same place next week. Until then, good night and good luck.